this for coming and sharing. And then we just trust that you all will hear more information about what you need to know so that you can make an educated decision. And with that in mind, I'm going to move out of your way so that we can hear from them. You know, I am a Baptist preacher. I can hold the mic all night long. But I'm going to move out of your way so that we can hear the questions and the answers so that we can make an educated decision come April 26th. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. It's a great crowd we have here. My name's Tim Wheeler. I'm the managing editor of the Bay Journal, and until very recently was the environmental reporter for the Baltimore Sun. And I'm pleased to be your moderator tonight. The groups that organized this asked me if I would do it, and I had to say I was very impressed that this many groups, 21 different groups, got together and agreed to hold a forum. That you could get that many people together and they would agree on anything is pretty remarkable. So, but the reason for the forum was because there was a belief on part of these groups that there were important questions here that needed to be asked and posed to the candidates, and that you all had some important questions you wanted answered too about livability. So this is how it's going to go. This is going to be a little bit like speed dating. We've got a modest number of candidates here now. I'm told that a number of them are still going to be arriving from other events. There may be one or two who have to leave a little early. So we're going to try to move along as rapidly as possible. The candidates are each going to have a chance to give some opening remarks, outlining their general views on these livability issues. They will be 2 minutes each. That's the speed dating part. If we have, this group, that's not too bad, but if we have 12 or 15 or 24, we're going to have to move it along. After the opening remarks, then the groups have agreed that there are certain issues they would like to pose to the candidates, and so we have a list of questions. Some of those will be asked by members of the audience. Some of them I will ask, and we will ask after those questions have been covered, or maybe even before they've all been covered, we may open this up to the audience because there are questions that I'm sure that you have that you think have not been asked or need to be asked. All I would ask of you, and I will remind you later, is that you ask a question, don't make a speech. We don't have a lot of time. In fairness to everyone, put your question briefly with as little background as needed. Thank you. And so, at this point, why don't we start to my immediate right, and we'll just work this side and then the other side and then back again. And we have a timer. Raise your hand here. She will give you a warning at 1 minute, 30 seconds, and 15. She's right here. All right.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Calvin Young, and I'm running for mayor of Baltimore. Our city is in a state of emergency. We've recently had 344 homicides. We're facing a $75 million budget deficit, and over a quarter of our citizens live in poverty. When I speak to people in our city, they agree, as I do, that we are in need of new, fresh leadership for our city. I was born and raised here in Baltimore. I grew up in Northeast Baltimore in Hamilton to a single mother who's been a correctional officer since 1992. I went to Poly, studied mechanical engineering at New York University before working on Black Hawk helicopters and jet engines. I'm a former national chairman of the National Society of Black Engineers, so I've helped thousands of young people to become excited and exposed to engineering and to become engineers themselves. I'm a graduate of the Harvard Business School, and I've worked at the White House, where I focused on small business policy for the President of the United States. What I believe we can do in Baltimore is we can create small business growth, we can create new opportunities in education, and we can make this a better, livable city. I only have 1 more minute left, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut it there. I'm really excited about your questions. I'm really excited to listen to you, and I hope you can learn more about me at my website, www.electcalvinyoung.com. Thank you so much.
Amazing. All right. Let's take the one from the other end here. We're going to do this a little differently.
Okay.
If everybody speaks less than 2 minutes, you earn time later.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Patrick Gutierrez, and I'm running for mayor because I have 2 young daughters, and I want a better city for them and for everyone who lives here. And like so many other people here tonight and around the city, I am fed up with the way this city has been run these past several years. I'm fed up with the way people have been treated, or in many cases, mistreated. I'm fed up with the way our money has been wasted. And I'm fed up with the way our needs have been ignored. We deserve better. The office of the mayor has the responsibility to set the standard for how the entire city is going to be viewed. And previous mayors have set a very low bar. We can do better. And as someone who has been a proven change agent his entire career and who was trained specifically to go in and turn around poor performing operations, I will raise that standard. Because I don't believe we have a resource problem in this city. We have a resource management problem. And with better leadership and better day-to-day management of our people and our resources, we can accomplish a lot. You're going to hear a lot about ideas tonight, but these ideas are the same ideas we've heard time and time and time again. But you know what we haven't seen? Results. I am somebody who was judged on one thing and one thing only my entire career, and that's getting results. And I was able to do that all around the country, including right here in Baltimore. I was sent here on what was supposed to be a 2-year assignment, and here I am 16 years later. I love my city, I want better, and if I'm given the opportunity, I will give us a better Baltimore. Thank you.
Okay. Come on in. Okay, next. Right here, yes.
Hi, I'm David Warnock. I'm the guy in the pickup truck that you might have seen in my ads. You know, this is the most important election in a generation. It will determine how we view each other, how we view this city, and how the world views us. If you remember 3 things about me, remember that I am about jobs and opportunity, I'm about real change and transparency, and I deliver on my promises. Let me talk for a minute about my track record as an environmentalist. It started over 2 decades ago as the president of the Maryland chapter of Trout Unlimited, where we planted literally hundreds of silky dogwoods and pin oaks on the Jones Falls, the Little Gunpowder. From there, I went on to start the Warnock Foundation, where we supported things like the Baltimore Orchards, Morgan Grove's efforts at the USDA. And then I started a company by the name of Green Job Works, which employs 125 people in demolition and remediation in this city, doing recycling as well. But the crowning thing that I've done, and frankly the most important thing I've done in the last 10 years, and the reason why I wear this tie, is I started Green Street Academy. This is the tie that 650 kids wear every day. Green Street Academy is over on Hilton Parkway, 125 North Hilton Parkway. We put $20 million in the old 91 Gwynns Falls Middle School. The kids learn from our greenhouse. We have a 125-foot greenhouse, a tilapia farm that the kids manage. Our school is powered by solar panels, and we have free-range chickens. We are now the most chosen middle school in the city, and last year we had over 1,100 applications for 300 slots. Our school is powered by solar panels that were designed by our students working together with BG&E. And when our kids graduate from high school, they will have certifications in technology and in energy with BG&E and in healthcare. I'm looking forward to talking to you more about that, and I'm proud of my career as an environmentalist. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And now, to the left of Mr. Gutierrez, yes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Joshua Harris, and I'm a candidate for mayor. Last April, they told us that Baltimore was burning. Every major newspaper, every major media outlet said that Baltimore was on fire. And the reality is that Baltimore was burning long before that. The failed systems, the failed policies, the neglect for people in the city was causing Baltimore to crumble. And there's an urgency of now, right now in our city. An urgency for leadership that's going to be accountable, responsible, and transparent. I believe that the single greatest issue in Baltimore city politics is the distribution of capital, or the lack thereof. For administration after administration, the only place that has seen any investment has been downtown and the harbor, while the rest of our neighborhoods have been forced to scrape and fend for every dollar and grant dollar they could find to sustain themselves. As such, my administration will focus on building healthy, sustainable, and economically viable neighborhoods, using innovative approaches like bringing to market new houses that are energy efficient, establishing a solar streetlight program that will not only make our communities safer, but bring Wi-Fi to every household in Baltimore City. I'm what I like to think of as a progressive who believes in the triple bottom line of people, planet, profit. Putting people first because that's the foundation of everything that makes this city great. And then if we work towards issues of sustainability, of course there'll be profit to make as we move forward. Again, my name is Joshua Harris. My website is harrisforbaltimore.com. I look forward to answering your questions and spending more time with you this evening. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Harris.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Cindy Walsh. I am a candidate for mayor. You may not have heard of me because I'm a challenger and I'm not part of the establishment, so you don't hear me in the news, but I have a nonprofit organization. I'm an academic, and people follow me all over the city for years. I've talked about public policy issues and especially about the environment and greening issues here in Baltimore. So I'm well known, well supported. Please check out my website and my Facebook page. You'll see the policy issues that you'll want to agree with me. Just to let you know my history, my grandparents and generations lived on the Chesapeake Bay. My grandfather was a waterman and farmer. So I'm very connected to the Chesapeake Bay and to the idea of making sure that it stays healthy. I've lived out in Seattle for a decade or more, the greenest area in the country. I kayaked across Lake Union to get to work. I was a mountaineer that kept the mountains, Cascades, and the Olympics clean. So I am a huge environmentalist. I am different than many of these candidates on this, in this race. I don't support the established corporate connection that we have with development. I'm going to change that. I don't want huge corporate campuses that think that parks are corporate landscaping. I don't want big global corporate factories. They're going to just kill our environment. I'm for small, local manufacturing to bring our jobs. So I'll talk more to you about that. Check out my website and my Facebook page, Cindy Walsh for Mayor of Baltimore. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And you're up next, Senator.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Let me just tell you, I am excited about being the next mayor of Baltimore because I have done so many things in the city that make me proud of being a part of this city, having built the first brand new school in the city, the Baltimore Design School, in 30 years, having been a member of the Parks and People Foundation for a number of years and having served on 23 community boards in this city. I can tell you that what I believe the city needs is someone who's going to bring us all together. I had the opportunity to sit down with every single president of every university in this city. And what they say is they need someone who really focuses on how to unite Baltimore. I'm excited because I know that we have an opportunity here to continue to move our city forward. But I believe that before you begin to talk about what you can do, let's understand where we are. And so part of what I'm going to do is make sure that we scrub our city's budget and understand where we are. And for those of you who don't know, we currently have reduced our property tax by 14 cents, and by 2020 we will have reduced it by 28 cents. But we can do more. But it means us working together. I believe in a clean harbor. I love the Baltimore Partnership that wants to continue the wheel, but more importantly, to make our harbor swimmable by 2020. Can you imagine that? More green spaces, looking at how we reduce supportive housing in this city so that we can have a healthier, cleaner, greener city. I look forward to talking to you about my platform of moving Baltimore forward, getting us working together, and understanding that this city can be great. Thank you all.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. That tells you what you have to know. I'm kind of used to working on a microphone. My name is Alan Walden. You've probably heard me on the radio, at least some of you through the years. I'm a Baltimorean by choice. I came here 28 years ago talking about all of the issues that confront us and finally decided that talking about them wasn't enough. It was time to get involved and do something about them. I love Baltimore. It's that simple. When I walked over here today and parked around the corner, I looked across the street and I saw green area. I like green area. It's wonderful. I like Druid Hill Park. I like Patterson Park. I like to be on the top of Federal Hill. I like the places where grass grows and trees grow. And I think it's vital that in any redevelopment of neighborhoods in this city, if you build a house, you got to plant a tree or more. You've got to keep the environment going. We have to clean up the waterways. We've got more water here than virtually any state in the United States. There are more rivers flowing down the mountains of Maryland than in any other state, and yet our water is often very polluted. We've got a lead problem. Not as bad as some states, thank goodness, but bad enough. All of that has to be dealt with. We have a recycling problem, but it's not just government that has to do it. It takes volunteerism. It takes the efforts of the people who use the recreational areas and use the green spaces to keep them clean. And even transportation works into it. We can get into that later. But again, my name is Alan Walden. I am a Republican, a stranger in a strange land. Thank you.
All right, and now we'll take the candidates who came in just a little bit late. We're glad you're here, but we'll take you in the order you came.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. My name's Elizabeth Embry, and I'm sorry for being late. So I have spent my life in the city and my career in government, primarily in city government, but also in state government. I've worked in the New York City Housing Department on financing affordable housing. I've worked in the city as a prosecutor and deputy state's attorney, driving down violent crime in the city, but also making our criminal justice system more fair and more humane. And I've worked in the in the Maryland Department of Labor Licensing and Regulation on aligning our workforce so that aligning our workforce with the needs of employers across the region and the state. And I work right now, I'm on leave, I work for the Attorney General's office, and I bring that up because I'm chief of the criminal division, and that includes environmental crimes for the state of Maryland. And we are the chief prosecutor of environmental crimes statewide. And we created the first task force with local state's attorney's offices, local police, local environmental groups to police more effectively and more effectively react to environmental crimes across the state of Maryland. And what I've learned in working in all of these systems is how interrelated the problems are, how public health relates to housing, how public health and housing relate to criminal justice, how all three relate to the environment, and how when we get one wrong, we get them all wrong. And the quality of our communities, the lived quality of our communities matters. It matters across all of these areas, from housing to public health to the environment. And if we're failing on all these fronts, and what I've learned in working at government is how important it is to have leadership that's effective, to have systems that are effective and accountable. And I've become so frustrated in my work across these government areas at the leadership that I've seen. And we need better leadership in Baltimore. Our city demands more. It demands an urgency that I have not seen in all of my years across administrations. I am excited to be here tonight. This is one of the most important issues in Baltimore. And as environmental crimes chief prosecutor for the state, I know that one of the worst offenders in the state of Maryland is the city of Baltimore. We're dumping unbelievable amounts of raw sewage into our waterways every day. So I look forward to talking more about how we can change that and involving the people in this room and making that happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you and good evening. I apologize for being late. Elizabeth and I was in the same place out in the cold over on Patapsco Avenue. But I am really pleased to be here tonight, and I'm pleased to be here tonight because the issues that you want to talk about are not only dear to my heart, but probably the first mayor of this city that really took the challenge on to make a cleaner, greener, healthier, safer city, not using buzzwords, but by effectively making changes within city government. First and foremost, we have to have a safe city. We know that. And in order to have a safe city, I was able to reduce the crime, not just talk about what we're going to do, because I even have a plan to even reduce it more so that we can focus on the basic issues that affect us as a city that has not been the healthiest city, a city that has not been as sensitive to issues as relates to the environment. But I created the first sustainable commission that the city's had. I created single stream recycling and one-day trash, not because I was trying to cut back on trash, but to educate the public that if we recycled more, then less would go in our landfill. And I have a plan that will even allow us, because the contract is coming up in this next administration, to reduce what we currently put at Bresco. I want to see us work with creating recycling as well as using our food waste for energy. I want to enhance our green space. The tree canopies that we were able to do over my administration has bloomed even more. But we have to make sure that we have agencies and that we have financing within our agency creatively to have a forestry department who cannot be reactive but be proactive. And so my record really speaks for itself. This is an area that, as I said, because when a city is healthy, mentally, physically, and spiritually, then education becomes a priority and crime is reduced, and we're able to sustain this earth for the next generation. That's what it's about. That's why I'm getting back into this race. It's not about me, but it's about the next generation to come. And in closing, because I think my time is almost up, when we went out on Friday mornings on our bike in the hot and the cold weather, going around the city, it was to create an environment to welcome that we want to enhance all modes of transportation. And so I didn't do it because, this is something popular. Still have my bike from the 70s when many of you weren't even born, because I know what it takes to move the city forward. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Okay, thank you. Do we have any other late arriving candidates? Oh, one just appeared. All right, your turn. You have 2 minutes, and we will interrupt if you go too long.
Got it.
Please don't prattle.
First and foremost, thank you for this opportunity today. My name is Councilman Nick Mosby. I represent the 7th District. We're actually in the 7th District. Just to let you know a little bit about myself, I was born in the city of Baltimore, born and raised in Northeast Baltimore. I was product of a single-family home. My mother, I grew up in a 3-bedroom house with 6 women. My grandmother, who was the matriarch of our family, had a 7th grade education. She was a domestic worker here in the city of Baltimore. My mother, she worked 36 years at Social Security. I watched her every single day roll out of bed around 4:30 a.m. To get up to catch 2 buses to go to Social Security. I shared a bedroom with my mother to the 8th grade, my mother and my older sister. I tell you that because at the end of the day, we are fruits of someone else's labor. It's what is poured into us. And like my grandmother, who had a 7th grade education, my mother, who was one of the first persons in her family to graduate from high school, and myself being the first person in my family to go to college and get a degree. It's about what we do and what we provide the next generation. It's not about our bios or our resumes, but it's the success that we tend and lend to generations after us. And I say that because that directly ties into our environment. We've gone around the story over and over again of looking at the way that we have polluted, the way that we haven't taken care of our environment, the way we haven't necessarily protected the sanctity of our environment. And it's up to us to ensure that we pass an environment and a community and a city that's much healthier than the ones that we've adopted. And unfortunately, when you do not have a government that is serious to go after the challenges in dealing with issues like this, you do not have that. As city councilman, I was able to do a lot of environmental things in West Baltimore. One of the most proud things I hold up is a thing called One Piece, when I ask every single resident in my district to pick up 1 piece of trash a day. If that's 10,000 residents, that's 10,000 pieces of trash off our streets, out our streams, and out the bay on a daily basis. My name is Nick Mosby. My website is mosbyformayor.com. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is that all the candidates? Nobody hiding in the audience? Is it still time to file? So this is where the fun part begins. We have a list of the groups that got together here, the 21 of them. They finally agreed on 11 different questions to ask. And there are, by my count now, what, we have 10 of the candidates up there? So if everybody got a minute and 11 questions, we would not have time for anything from the audience. So we're going to do this a little bit helter-skelter. Everybody gets 1 minute to answer the question. If you don't really have anything to add to what your competitors had to say, then simply say, I agree, and we can move on to the next one. If you don't get it, we may very well cut to the chase and only call on, I'm going to start with different people to answer the questions for one thing, okay? So you can raise your hand, but I'm going to vary the person who gets the answer first, out of fairness. If you disagree, of course, we want to hear from you with each other. We want to know where the differences in policy are. So we're going to, without further ado, get to these questions, and we're going to save time at the end, and I hope it's going to be a substantial amount of time. I'm going to make sure it is, for people in the audience to ask their questions. So, Dr. France, since you've been so kind as to make your house of worship available to us tonight, you get the honor of the first question.
Thank you. So for whoever would like to answer, the first question deals with vacant homes. Baltimore City was once a city of 949,000 people. It's now 622,000, so obviously there are a number of vacant homes. The question then becomes, how would you connect the dots between the vacant homes to cleaner, greener, safer neighborhoods? How would you use the nonprofits and foundations? What's the role that the city would play such that we would have a greener, healthier, safer city when we have the number of vacants that we do today?
Okay, hold on. We'll start here, and then we'll go to you, and then we'll go from there, okay? Go ahead. You got a mic? Oh. Here. 1 minute.
Hello. My plan for Baltimore is to redevelop each community, the surrounding communities themselves, as residential entities and not as corporate campuses. And so my belief is to go in, stop leaving the surrounding communities waiting for development. Go in and redevelop those areas. Let each community rehab, bring down, demolish, recycle the debris, rehab the houses, bring in the HUD and the enterprise zone money to do the houses for these surrounding communities and make them livable for everybody that would want to live there. Not just lower class, but middle class and more affluent. We need to have mixed communities. We don't want condensed poverty and condensed wealth. And so my campaign is about making sure that that happens.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next. On the end, Ms. Dixon.
Thank you. First, we have to stop using the salt shaker approach for development. Secondly, Baltimore City government, the truth be told, we don't have the cash, we don't have the money to give necessarily to a small developer, but what we do have is land and we have property. And creating a land bank and a land trust, we can use that to leverage the properties in communities with developers, with individuals to create green space as well as create opportunities for small individual or large developers to create a community within various neighborhoods. I know that through a land bank and a land trust, there's examples after examples in Cleveland and now in Detroit that have been successful that will help to not only retain, but will increase and enhance people in coming into the city.
Okay, thanks. You're next.
Baltimore has changed. We had 900,000 plus people here during World War II, and immediately thereafter we have 624,000, give or take right now. We have a lot of vacant property. A lot of vacant property is in neighborhoods where people generally don't want to move. When the houses cannot be rehabilitated, you've got to knock them down. They have to be taken down. Those that can be rehabilitated should be, but that should be in an environment created by the administration that draws private industry in to do it. Now, not all of the vacant areas can be used for residences, and the ones that aren't used for residences, those are natural green areas. You put park space in there, you put parks in the neighborhoods, people are going to enjoy them more, people are going to get out more, and spend less time hiding in their homes in a much more environmentally friendly area.
Thank you. Let's let him go, and then you're right after him, okay?
You know, this election is about leadership, and I'll give you two things that we will do in my administration. One, I've said to the biggest developer in Harbor East that you cannot harvest the fruit of the inner harbor if you are not planting seeds in East Baltimore and West Baltimore. In my administration, if you get a TIF, you get a tax break, you get a rec center, you get a community school. I started a company by the name of Green Job Works. I look at the housing opportunity in our city as a way to put hundreds of people to work. And those people at Green Job Works, they have certification in lead paint remediation, asbestos remediation. So our opportunities in housing are tied to our challenges as well. There's also a number of things that are going around this country that I think we ought to look at. In Chicago, for example, if they tear down a house, they sell the vacant property to the person next door for $100. It creates wealth and value for the people who stay in our neighborhoods. We'll do that in my administration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I think we need to not throw the baby out with the bathwater and take lessons from our past. And I've heard people say that the Dollar House program didn't work. Well, I still believe land banks are important, but I also believe that Dollar House programs can work in our city. But I think you can't develop one house at a time. It has to be a collection of individuals by investing in the people who live in your communities. And when I was on the board of Parks and People, we talked about creating the one park system. So part of what has been already said on the stage about having to knock some of those houses down is important, but how we do it strategically is also important. Creating green space is essential. It makes us a healthier city. It makes healthy neighborhoods. So the Dollar House program, the Parks and People project, and also looking at what our mayor currently has of creating more housing in our community and working with developers and working with people in our neighborhoods to bring back our city. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think a lot of times our biggest challenges is also our best opportunity. And when we look at the vacants throughout the city of Baltimore, it's a huge opportunity for us to grow. I think the way that we look at it from an economic perspective, it's all about supply and demand. We have this huge amount of supply and limited demand of going after it. And in order to increase the demand, we have to increase the incentives. We have to lure folks to go after that demand. That's why in my comprehensive plan, we talk about tax reduction. But we also have to do a better job of educating the public on homestead tax credit. I talk about this not from something I read in a book or saw in a movie. I talk about it from something I've done. When I moved back to Baltimore from college, I purchased a 20-year dilapidated house 5 minutes away from here in West Baltimore. The houses across the street were abandoned. There was illegal dumping in my backyard. There was an open-air drug market in the front of my house. But the reason we bought there was because Druid Hill Park was our backyard, because we had access to multimodal transportation and proximity to downtown. So it's really about building off our strengths. What the city of Baltimore has done around housing is taking a scarcity of funds and throwing it around the city versus building off our strengths.
Thank you. Now your turn.
So one of the very first things that I said is that bringing energy efficient houses to market. Our housing problem in Baltimore City isn't a problem, it's an opportunity to put people to work. And so we have tons of houses, 40,000 plus vacants roughly. We have tons of infrastructure in place underneath our ground, lead pipes running through that need to be replaced. And we need to train and prepare a workforce here in Baltimore City to do that work. And so just in West Baltimore, right down the street in Poppleton, where I live at, 2 weeks ago, the city council allowed $18 million to be given away to a major developer, one of the wealthiest developers in the world, actually, that didn't need it. And the community was requesting, as part of that proposal, that it be included the establishment of the Poppleton Training Academy that would train people in construction, green jobs, and the trades to begin to prepare a workforce and put people to work right here in Baltimore City to repair and rehabilitate the houses for all the work that's going to come down the pipeline when we look towards creating energy-efficient houses and bringing them to market. So that's exactly what we need to do to create living wage jobs and restore our housing market in Baltimore City.
Thank you. All right. One last one. All right. Go ahead.
So thank you. I want to make 2 points. A lot of smart things have been said. 2 points. One is supporting the work of communities. And one of the great community leaders in this area is sitting here. I live in Better Waverly with the great Miriam Havens, who has taken over land next to hers, and with support from the city, pretty good support from the city, has made it a thriving and beautiful community garden. So the city can, A, help turn over property to communities into a land trust. It can also provide resources, and it can also support the organizations that support community gardens across the city. The second piece is the city has a limited amount of money, right? And redeveloping vacant houses costs money. But what we can do is be a leader in looking at alternative sources of revenue. And one of the ways to do this is looking at what I talked about, the ways that things are interconnected, and the fact that lead paint and high asthma rates, which is a result in part of vacant housing and the housing problems across the city, leads to higher hospitalizations, leads to truancy, leads to all these problems that are expensive for the city. So Green and Healthy Homes is one example of an organization that is looking at the social compact model to use the savings to have more money to spend on these important issues. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, candidates. Now, next question will be from Jerry Okweza. Are you ready?
Thank you, candidates. In Baltimore, a bleak treeless street also means drug dealing, vacancy, and vagrancy. On Newington Avenue, where I live, in Reservoir Hill, we started by planting trees, which brought shade and beauty, self-respect, and pride, attracted new homeowners, and now has created a web of neighbors united in fighting crime. What I'm saying is, planting trees is a direct way to fight crime. Trees also improve stormwater management, economic development, air quality. It ameliorates climate change, and it reduces trash and runoff into the Chesapeake Bay. Yet, our tree canopy has declined over the past decades. How can your budget priorities help Baltimoreans plant trees?
Okay. We'll start with the ones who didn't answer the last. Go ahead.
Thank you for your question, ma'am. So planting trees is absolutely the right thing to do. The statistics have proven it, but it takes money to do that. Now, as I said earlier, we have an incredible amount of resources right here today, but they're just not being managed properly. I mean, the fact that the city has not had audits in over 30 years literally makes my head want to explode. So the first thing I'm going to do to make sure that we have enough money to plant trees in every neighborhood is to do full, complete financial and performance audits of every single agency in the city within the first 18 months. Then we'll know how much money we really have, and then we'll be able to allocate that money where it needs to go instead of where it's currently going, which nobody knows. And then the second thing to your point, so they did a tree planting program in my neighborhood a few years back, and I submitted my request for a tree, and it didn't come, and I called 311, and it didn't come, and I wrote a letter to the arborist, and it didn't come. And finally, 6 months later, I went and planted my own tree. So if you go to my neighborhood, you'll see green trees and one red one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Young, you're next.
So I agree with everything Pat said, so I'm not going to reiterate those things. But, you know, when I was in 5th grade, I remember one of my teachers told me that we have more trees today in Baltimore than we did when John Smith wrote up the Chesapeake. The difference, however, though, is the amount of pollution. So there are a lot of things that we do today in Baltimore there are a lot of things that we can do so that we can reduce pollution. Number one, we need a world-class transportation system in our city. We need subway systems specifically because of 2 reasons. Number one, of the pollution that happens with cars, but also because when you have a world-class subway system, people like you and me don't have to spend $10,000 a year on gas and on maintenance for our cars. We can spend that money in our economy. We can spend that money on small businesses and small business growth so that we can then hire people who are in our community so that they can have jobs so that we can then reduce crime, which gets right back to your question. So I think that some of the things that we can do in the city, it requires us to have the right mayor, the right person for the 21st century to think generationally. You know, and that's the end of it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Anybody else on trees? Right here, in the middle. Senator Pugh.
First of all, I think we understand what is already going on in our city. Having served on the board of Parks and People, one of the things that we do well is plant trees and provide trees for our neighborhoods and our communities. Everything does not have to come out of the city's budget because they're very good at writing grants and getting grants to provide trees for our communities. So oftentimes when we think that things need to be done in our communities, we think that the city has to take it out of their budget. Let's acknowledge what we do well, and let's acknowledge the groups and organizations that do it well, and Parks and People Foundation does it well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Embry, you raise your hand. Next.
So I want to say we can't afford to plant a tree in every corner of the city, but what I would do is focus on our poorest, densest communities that have the most blacktop and the least tree canopy, and have a greening plan for each of those communities. And I agree that not every dollar has to come out of the city budget, but the city has to really be committed and not just say to neighborhoods, we want you to go plant trees. The city has to bring the resources, whether it's from the private sector or the city. But it's a great way for neighborhoods to partner with each other. It's a great way to organize businesses around projects where they can give and volunteer. It's a great project to bring the city together. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harris, yes.
The Baltimore Tree Trust does a great job of planting trees throughout the city. They've planted hundreds in the Guilford Oak Goucher community over the last few years. But one of the things we have to make sure that we're looking at is we know that trees reduce air pollution and air quality. And you combine that with the Maryland Renewable Portfolio Standards and moving towards solar energy and how we can by the year 2020, if we do that effectively, we can reduce our pollution by 11 million metric tons. And what that'll do for our environment and for our sustainability is extremely vital. But in order to do that, we have to value it. And so I live in West Baltimore, and on West Baltimore Street in Stockton, we spent the entire summer with a group of youth work students redoing a vacant lot, turning it into a park. And Parks and People came out and planted some trees. And just yesterday, DPW came out to work on a water line and drove a truck through the middle of the park and cleared out 3 of the trees that were just planted. And I say that if this were in Fells Point, Canton, or another community, that would not have happened. And so we have to learn to value all of our communities equally who are trying to move in that direction. That's all.
Ms. Dixon.
And what should have been done is whoever was planting those trees and saw that happen, they should have reported that to the department head of Public Works. I mean, accountability is important. And those agencies work for the citizens who pay taxes. So briefly, I'm going to talk about the tree canopy, and I'm sorry that the program stopped over this last 5 years, because it was through my administration that began to increase the tree canopy by working with the Baltimore Tree Trust and other groups like Parks and People, et cetera, where we collaborated. The city didn't necessarily have the money and the resources, but through this entity, we were able to increase. Any new development provided trees as well. Every area that we saw when we collaborated, I have a tree that was planted about 6 years ago in my yard, a dogwood tree, because I wanted to show by example that each of us can do that. And so the city's role is to help and to monitor, and when something is working, You know, it doesn't matter who created the program. It's about building on those strengths. And that's an area where I will definitely get back to enforcing. Thank you.
Ms. Warner.
Well, let me just say that, again, I totally agree with Patrick. This election is about leadership. Those audits that need to be done, they really haven't been done in 30 years. And if we elect the same old politicos, we still won't get audits. But let me tell you what we're doing at Green Street Academy in partnership with Morgan Grove at the U.S. Forest Service. We have a class at Green Street Academy where kids are out planting trees with the U.S. Forest Service. They're learning science and math. We're capturing their imaginations and giving them a jump start on the job of their choice in tomorrow's economy. And they're planting those trees in Edmondson Village and in West Baltimore. That's how we tie everything together in this city. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I want to expand on my first description of building construction economies in every community as we rebuild them. Part of that second economy is going to be a fresh food economy. As we tear down our communities and tear out all of that concrete and all of those houses that no longer belong there, we need to create grand central green spaces, public green spaces with grand greenhouses. I'd like to have a barn where we have small animal husbandry so that we could have chickens and goats and small animals and actually have a fresh food economy in every community. That means people who grow the vegetables, people who raise the small animals, people who butcher and harvest, distribute, small green grocery stores in every community. And part of that is planting the trees in that green space and with orchards and whatnot. If we don't make a local green food economy in every community, we won't meet our goals for fresh food for the city. Thank you.
Okay. Now, thank you, candidates. Our next question comes from Hallie Vandergag with Blue Water, Baltimore.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to ask you a question about infrastructure. So not only here with Blue Water Baltimore, I'm here with all of the frustrated citizens who are fed up with sewage, not just in the Inner Harbor and their streams, but in their basements and on the streets where they push their baby carriages through or running down the Jones Falls. As hopefully you all know, the EPA will be issuing a new deadline for the consent decree. I'd like to ask you two specific questions. As mayor, what will you do? What can you promise us this evening to assure commitment to that new deadline? And will you be willing to work with advocates on making change? In addition, the streets are going to be continued to be filled with sewage until major work is done. Would you be willing to work with us to adequately protect public health through signage and other activities so while this deadline is met, we do a better job of taking care of our citizens?
Thank you. Mr. Mosley.
The Baltimore Sun did it best when they did an article about the sewer infrastructure and the federal consent decree. And in it, they talked about how the Baltimore city government had spent over hundreds of $millions of taxpayers' money to fulfill the need of the consent decree, yet we were unable to really articulate how far the ball has been moved forward to complete it. It's absolutely ridiculous. You know, in my past life as an electrical engineer, I had the amazing ability of managing large technical projects. I built data centers in Pomona, California, all the way to Reston, Virginia. And the one thing about doing large technical projects is you need certified project management professionals to run your projects, to ensure that you're finishing your jobs on time and at cost. So from a cost performance index perspective to a scheduling performance index perspective. And as the next mayor of Baltimore, I ensure that we'll set up an organization that has certified project management professionals called the Centralized Project Management Office to run that. I'll work directly with Blue Water Baltimore and all the advocates to ensure that the city's lock and step in promoting awareness and education. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, mentioning my articles will not win you an extra vote. Mr. Wallen.
Baltimore is old. This is no secret. It's one of the oldest cities in the country. I mean, it's over 300 years old from the time it was settled. The infrastructure The water infrastructure and the sewage infrastructure are in many places ancient. And it will take a lot more than has been spent up until now. This, by the way, there's no quick fix to this to get everything done, but you've got to understand where the pollution is coming from. We heard a little while ago about the encouragement of one person to pick up one piece of garbage every day. And in a district with 10,000 constituents, that's 10,000 pieces of garbage. Wait a second. Who dumped the 10,000 pieces of garbage to start with? Why were they thrown there? And it's not a Baltimore City problem exclusively in dealing with sewage. A lot of that sewage comes from the county.
Thank
from
you.
the counties.
Thank you. Anyone else? Right down here on this end. Ms. Embry.
Just very briefly, the answers are yes and yes, but I just want to expand on the first. So one of the problems that our current administration has had is an unwillingness to be transparent and work with people who are actually experts in this area. So from my perspective, it's a great luxury in the city to have some of the experts, national experts, and certainly experts in what goes on locally. So I don't only want to inform the advocates of the community, I want to bring you in and have you help me figure it out, because it is a really hard problem. There's not an easy fix, but we need to get the outfalls closed as soon as humanly possible. And we've spent a lot of money with very little progress. So I want to bring people in. That's what I want to do as mayor. Thank you.
Ms. Walsh, then Mr. Warner.
If you look at your water bill, it says there's a tax there, and it says that that's for maintaining our water and sewage pipes over the length of decades that everybody in the city has been paying. So we've already paid to have that done. The money has been just reappropriated. They're waiting for this grand stimulus from the federal government, and what they were waiting for is to position global corporations to come in and take care of that infrastructure. It's already happening. It's happening here. It's happening across the country. Global corporations are going to be given that stimulus money to do our water and our sewer. We don't want that. I fight that. I will not allow that. We can get the money. We can redevelop our water system and the sewer system ourselves, keep it public. It should have been done. There should not be sewage problems and water leaking out. Fresh water is a commodity we're short of. It's environmentally unthinkable to lose all this water.
Thank you. Mr. Warner.
Absolutely, we will post signs, as you're talking about. But not only that, we will create a map of where the point source pollution is coming from in our city, because the citizens of Baltimore need to know where that trash is coming from and where the sewage outflows that are coming down the Jones Falls, coming into the Inner Harbor are coming from. We need to give people the information so that they can make decisions. And I'll make this personal. I own a kayak, and I kayak on the Inner Harbor. So I see that pollution. And I'll also make a commitment to you, and I hope that you'll join me. By the second year of my administration, we will swim across the Inner Harbor. This is a mayor that takes it personally, and I hope you join me, because I'll be there swimming across the Inner Harbor by 2018.
Thank you. Who else? Mr. Young? Okay.
So I do want to agree with some things that others have said, specifically what Ms. Embry said, yes and yes. But I want to get back to something I said earlier about creating new subway systems, because it gives us an opportunity to build that new underground infrastructure for the city. Now, one of the things that we have to take care of when we think about that is that there are a lot of underground streams. So that's something that will be a challenge that we have to make sure we can preserve as we build these new subway systems. But it also gives us the opportunity to build new waterway systems, new sewer systems, things like that, so that our city doesn't have to see the type of pollution that we're seeing. Immediately what we can do is we can do stopgap measures to stop the bleeding. That's critically important to make sure that we're not seeing that go all the way to the harbor. Let's stop it there and then work our way up the stream and solve the problems as we go along. That's the way we do it in normal business. We can do it in city government as well. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, go ahead. Then you, Senator Pugh.
Yes and yes. And we have to do it. We have to find the money to do it, because if we don't pay for it now, we're going to pay for it with the long-term effects on the environment, on the health disparities that it causes if we don't make an impact immediately on it. And this comes back to, as well, training and preparing a workforce here in Baltimore City that can do that work to replace the infrastructure. And if we make that investment now, we'll again be tackling multiple issues at the same time by preparing people here for those jobs. What do we know about crime? 75% of felony crimes are committed by individuals who have prior interaction with the law. If we want to have an immediate impact on crime reduction in our city, we focus on preventing offenders from reoffending. And if you have a job, you won't be in the streets committing crime, and that's just the reality. We have to make the investment up front now to train people to do this work that needs to be done anyway, so we're now not outsourcing it to other places.
So yes and yes, but the key really is about putting things together that achieve results, because we know what to do. We know we need to embrace our partners who have all the subject matter expertise that we could possibly need to get the job done. But what happens is we don't embrace those partners. The city tries to do it itself, and the results speak for themselves. And to piggyback on something that was said earlier about the DPW folks that ran over the trees, we need accountability for our city employees. Ms. Dixon said earlier, you're supposed to report it because city agencies work for you. That's the problem. No, they don't. They're supposed to work for us, but if they're not held accountable, if someone can just run roughshod through the park knocking down trees and still keep their job, what message does that send? So we need accountability at every level of city government, from the police chief to the permit clerk. That's why I'm running for mayor, because for my entire career, I've been able to institute that accountability across all boards to make sure people are doing the jobs we're hiring them to do.
Thank you. Senator Pugh.
The answer is yes and yes, and we should be accountable and we should be transparent. You know, we talk about having a city website. That information ought to be posted. We ought to have a schedule for it. I mean, we're over time now in terms of when this mandate was put in place, and we've not complied. So we should schedule it, let the communities know when it's going to take place, because the infrastructure is not going to get younger. It's going to continue to get older. So we don't fix it now. Again, like everybody else on the stage has said, we're just going to pay for it later.
Thank you. Ms. Dixon.
Yes and yes, but also we have to make sure that we put in place an accountability process. CityStat was thrown out the window, and CityStat is another mechanism and a tool that you can use to assess. But the other piece is, and this is the part where sometimes the public doesn't realize, is that you can't have consultants and consultants and consultants in an agency who are checking each other whether or not they've looked at reports running the Department of Public Works. And last but not least, when the federal government gave us this consent decree and not give us any resources and said, you figure out how to pay for it, and then the water bills go up and up and up, and the sewage bills go up and up and up, we need to, in this upcoming election for president, have a president who's going to be sensitive to urban cities. It's going to take federal, it's going to take state, and it's going to take local resources that are going to need to be spent accountable and responsible.
Thank you. Any more? All right. The next question from Mark Washington. Mark, step up.
This question is really near and dear to my heart. Parks in low-income and predominantly minority communities often receive less maintenance than those in wealthier communities. What resources will your administration provide to ensure that all city green spaces, including parks, trails, and streams, are, and this is a key word here, equitably maintained?
Okay, thank you. You're up first, Ms. Walsh.
Everybody agrees we need oversight and accountability. I have spent my entire professional career doing just that, building operational administrative systems with checks and balances for large operations from NIA, NCI and NIH national clinical trials to United Parcel Service as an industrial engineer. I have huge experience in making sure that we find all of the revenue and make sure it's spent correctly. We can boost our budget tremendously by doing that. And then we have that money to go out and hire a public works system for our city. We don't have any public works. The idea that we're going to have our citizens out keeping our median strips clean is not acceptable when you're paying taxes, especially as much as we pay here. There's no reason not to have that revenue. And that will address the fact that our public school grounds, our parks, and the playgrounds are kept by public workers. Thank you.
Anyone else? Right here. Mr. Harris first, and then you, Ms. Dixon. The quick hand.
I mean, he hit it on the head. And one of the first things I said when I got on the stage was redistribution of capital. Communities of color in Baltimore City have been left behind, and they're ignored, and there's no investment going into them. And we need to change that narrative, and it comes back to redistributing the capital to make sure that they're getting just as much attention paid to them as every other community in Baltimore City. And we need to make sure we put in place appropriate systems, management, and oversight so that we're appropriately managing the resources that we have so that we know what's happening. Because right now, well, not just with our money, but also with our Department of Public Works, we have no clue what's being done, what isn't being done. The same thing with our streets. They come through and they'll redo a street and then they rip up the plumbing immediately, or they'll go in to fix a pipe a week later, and that's problematic. So we have to make sure we have systems management to make sure that we're effectively, equitably managing all of our communities, particularly our communities of color, which have been.
What are your plans for the youth of this city?
This is obviously the best.
Hold on. Well, let's start in the middle because we've been going from either end to either end. Senator Pugh, you get to answer that one first. Quickly.
First of all, I want us to understand that learning begins in the womb. So I want to make sure that our children are getting the opportunities to learn in quality schools, community-oriented schools, as quickly as they can. I want to